All right, good. I think I'm good. All right, good evening, everybody. All right, very quickly, so glad to be here. I was just telling my table that I'm actually thinking about switching career paths because the hospitality here has been second to none. So I don't know if everybody gets this like all the time, but if it isn't, like I really feel special today. So give it up for the people that made this event possible. So very quickly, y'all, like you heard in my bio, my name is Jason Gibson. So that means you know me. So on the count of three, I want you to do me a favor. Tell me your name. Here we go. One, two, three. Hey, Ruth. Ruth, this is Chris, Abby, everybody. So good to meet you. Now I feel like we're friends. Now I can tell you a story about something that I did when I was 25 years old. When I was 25 years old, I made a promise to myself. I said, Jason, you're going to go out of the country once a year, every year. Now, I've missed about 2 years because something called COVID-19 happened. But for the most part, I've gone out of the country every year since I was 25 years old. One of my favorite trips out of the country was a trip to Thailand. Tolu told me that his flight was about 13 hours coming here. Yeah, that flight to Thailand was 22 hours. And I wasn't in first class because I couldn't afford it. I thought about getting first class, but I looked at the price. I said, "Nah, I can't do it. No, not right now. I still can't do it because that thing was in the five figures." However, I looked and I went to Thailand, but I did what all of us, I think, do. I went on YouTube and I tried to figure out what all is there to do in Thailand. So I had a lot of great excursions. I went zip lining. I went to what they call the Monkey Beach. I went to Phuket. I went to so many places. One of the places that I wanted to go that I didn't get an opportunity to go was called the Crocodile Farm in Thailand. You can Google it right now. What I found out was this particular excursion in Thailand was extremely special, not just for the crocodiles, but I'll tell you in a second why it was special. What would happen is I was reading an article about this particular crocodile farm in Thailand one day, and it talked about how all of these passengers from all different walks of life, all these tours, they would load onto this ferry and they would sail into the middle of this body of water. And they would have a tour guide telling all about the habitat of a crocodile, how they intermingle, how they reproduce, all things crocodile. But that wasn't the special part about this crocodile farm. What they did was twice a year, they had been in business for 8 years. Twice a year, they did this thing where they would have a whistle. The tour guide would blow it, and all the crocodiles would come and situate themselves around the ferry to which they would continue the tour. Once that happened, he would continue in his speech, but they would do something twice a year. They would have someone to accept the challenge. But in the 8 years that they were open, nobody ever accepted this challenge. The challenge was that anybody who would jump off the boat into the water with the crocodiles and safely swim to shore, they would write them a $1 million check. It's not a game. You can go find this article right now. Nobody in the 8 years that they had been in business ever decided that they were going to jump off that ferry and get in the midst of those crocodiles, but that would change today. This particular tour group, they were together. The tour guide said, all right, today we have $1 million for the brave soul that decides to jump off this ferry into the water amongst the crocodiles, some 40 or 50 crocodiles, and safely swim to shore. He said, $1 million going once. Not a one person said a word. I would have been one of the ones that was silent. Would you have been silent? Me too. Not my life. He said, $1 million going twice. Nobody said a word. He said $1 million three times, and Cameron, still not one passenger said a word. And right as the tour guide fixed his attention back to the front of the boat, ready to continue the tour, the entire boat heard a humongous splash, only to turn around and see somebody jump in the water. You could tell there were a multitude of sentiments from the passengers on this ferry because some of them were scared. They were horrid. They were scared for that man's life. And what was he thinking jumping into this water? But very long story short, he continued to swim. And before you know it, he got closer and closer to shore to the point where everybody started to get excited. Those sentiments that were once fearful and scared for him started turning to congratulatory sentiments like, God, you got it, man. Keep swimming. Long story short, he made it to shore. Nobody had ever done this, and the tour guide, he cut that tour short. He said, we got to get back so we can get him his check. They got to shore. And everybody was patting him on the back. You are so courageous. You're so brave. I wouldn't have never done that. What were you thinking? And the tour guide came up to him. He said, hey, as promised, here's your $1 million check. But before he put it in his hand, he said, I just got to ask you, what made you jump into the water? This particular tourist was drenched from the crown of his head to the sole of his feet. And as he wrung out his clothes, he looked him in the eye and said, I'll be honest, I didn't jump. Somebody pushed me. Now, what am I trying to tell you? Am I trying to tell you to go jump into a lake full of crocodiles? Not quite. But what I am trying to tell you is sometimes, most times, oftentimes, you need somebody that'll push you. When you're scared, somebody to push you. When you're timid, somebody to push you. When you're struggling, somebody to push you. When you're stuck in between a rock and a hard place, between your potential and your greatness, you need somebody that will push you. And everybody in this room can attest to a point in your life before you got to where you are that had it not been for somebody pushing me to do and be better, I wouldn't be where I am today. And that is my intent today. For the next, it was 30 minutes on the program. I got about 22 left. For the next 22 minutes, my intention is to push you. Not physically, I'm not going to put my hands on you, but push you mentally, to make you think a little bit different than you thought before you walked in this room, to make you consider a perspective or perception that you may not have considered up to this point. My goal is to push you. Tell the person beside you, let them push you. Let them push you. Now look to the other side. Say, now you were my second choice, but let them push you. Let them push you. Let them, listen, y'all. Mahatma Gandhi said, "Our ability to reach unity in diversity is perhaps the greatest test and gift of our civilization." In other words, the more we start to acknowledge the differences that we inherently have, the more we can learn to embrace what makes us unique, what makes you you, Y-O-U, Y-O-U, your own uniqueness. Because at its core, I want y'all to understand one thing. We have this one thing in common. I don't care your ethnicity, your background, your socioeconomic outcome. Everybody in this room has this one thing in common. We all have two parents, four grandparents, 8 great grandparents, 16 second great grandparents, 32 third great grandparents, 64 fourth great grandparents, 128 fifth great grandparents, 256 sixth great grandparents, 512 seventh great grandparents, 1,024 eighth great grandparents, 2,048 ninth great grandparents. In order for you to be in this room today, I don't care where you came from, in order for you to be here today, you had to come from 12 generations over the last 400 years of a total of 4,094 ancestors. I want you to think for a moment. How much had to happen for you to exist today? How many decisions had to be made? How many struggles? How much adversity had to happen in order for you to be sitting in this seat that you are sitting in today? How many things had to go right? How many things had to go wrong? How many people had to be compromised? How many people had to be conditioned in order for you, yes, you, to be sitting where you are sitting today? How many decisions had to be made? There are two things that it'll be hard to convince me away from because of this fact. One, everybody in this room is a walking, talking, living, breathing, existing miracle. And two, based on 12 generations of over 4,094 ancestors over the last 400 years, and you got here, everybody in this room has to have a purpose. I want you to think how many decisions had to be made for you to be sitting in this seat, because it's often said that we're born looking like our parents, but we die looking like our decisions. Because our decisions have the power to drive our actions drive our outcomes, and our outcomes essentially create our future. So I want you to really think how much had to happen in order for you to be here today. How much hurt, how much pain, how much agony. However, in the grand scheme of Black History Month, we've got to take it all the way back to when this country got diverse. The year 1619, on the shores of Jamestown, Virginia. Jamestown, Virginia, where the first African slaves came from the continent of Africa and were sailed on the shore of Jamestown, Virginia, and made it to the Americas. They made it there. Many historians believe approximately 12 million slaves from the years of 1619 to the year of 1808 were transported from the continent of Africa to the Americas. 12 million. Historians also say that the transport from Africa to the Americas was approximately 80 days. These slaves weren't allowed to be at the deck of the ship. They had to be in the bottom of the ship that was called the hold in a lying position. They were there for 80 days without proper air quality, 80 days without proper ventilation, 80 days without sufficient nutrition, 80 days without proper water intake, 80 days. Historians estimate that of that 10 to 12 million slaves that was transported from Africa to the Americas, approximately 2 million died in transit. 2 million that would never get an opportunity to see life outside of the hold of that ship. 2 million that would never get an opportunity to see their families again. 2 million slaves. But as for the ones that did make it, resilience was their portion. It ensured that they made it from one continent to another. It was resilience that ensured that they made it through the period of chattel slavery. It was resilience that ensured that they made it through Reconstruction and the Civil War. It was resilience that ensured that they made it through Black codes and Jim Crow and the popularized civil rights movement. It was resilience that continues to keep certain minority groups today. Resilience being defined by knowing that I'm called to do or become something and not giving up until it's done. And in the words of the great Mahalia Jackson, we got to talk about not the who, the what, the where, the when, or the why, but based on her popular song throughout the civil rights era, how we got over. Mahalia Jackson, who was a famous gospel singer throughout the civil rights movement, Martin Luther King would call her at all times of night for a source of encouragement. Martin Luther King, who received 30 calls a day of death threats. He would call her to get some level of encouragement because he just didn't know how he was going to go another day and take another step. So he would call Mahalia Jackson to sing to him. And we cannot neglect the power and the impact that music had on the movement. It was gospel singers and blues singers that created a narrative, and music is a universal language. It gives us a means by which we can communicate through melodic lines and connect to another person's experience, not even knowing their story. It was music. And we had gospel music, but we can't forget about the original gangster rap. The original gangster rap that was also birthed by a woman. And I'm not talking about the gangster rap that came from Tupac or Biggie. I'm not talking about the gangster rap that came from these modern rappers like The Baby or Moneybagg Yo. I'm not talking about the gangster rap that even came from NWA or Straight Outta Compton. The original gangster rap came from a woman. And I know when you think about a woman, you think about Lil' Kim, Trina. You probably think about, I know we in Memphis today, they probably thinking about, yeah, Glow. And yeah. Probably thinking about Glorilla. But while the original gangster rap came from a woman, it came from a woman all the way back in the 19th century by the name of Araminta Ross. The original gangster rap came from a woman, Araminta Ross. I know many of you may not know her by her slave name, but surely you know her by a free name, one Harriet Tubman, who's responsible for freeing over 70 slaves from the South to the North, all while performing her hit single, the original gangster rap, I Ain't Gonna Let Nobody Turn Me Around. Now, unfortunately, we can't find that song on Apple Music. We can't find it on Spotify. We can't find it on Tidal or even Google Play. We can only find that song being birthed out of the souls of black folk who have fallen victim to dehumanization, but were rooted in determination. Determination that would not allow them to stay in bondage, a determination that would not allow them to stay subservient, a determination that would carry them through different parts of history and ultimately get us to where we are today. It was that type of determination. We can never forget about the heroes that ensured that we would get here today, like these two men on the screen. They had not taught us anything else. They taught us that in this life, we must at some point graduate from our potential and get into our greatness. Because potential is good, y'all. Potential is necessary. Potential is great. However, at some point, you got to get out of your potential and get into your greatness. Because at its core, nobody is talking about Malcolm X's potential anymore. Nobody's talking about Martin Luther King's potential anymore. Nobody is talking about Stokely Carmichael or Harriet Tubman's potential anymore. And I know not just because they are no longer with us, but we can come to people today. Nobody's talking about LeBron James' potential anymore. Nobody's talking about Patrick Mahomes or Beyonce or Taylor Swift's potential anymore. Why? Because every time they hit a platform, every time they are before people, every time they hit a stage, they give you greatness and not potential. So therefore, you can no longer label them within the confines of their potential. You've got to label them within the context of their greatness. It's got to get to the point when people start to label you in the context of your potential, it's no longer a compliment, it's an insult. And I want to end here by talking about these these three words. What do you have? I was right the first time. What do you have? Because something that we don't talk about often, a speech that often goes overlooked, we undermine it. Martin Luther King's last speeches, he took it from an ancient Jewish parable. It was a speech that wasn't before thousands, it was before a small group of civil rights workers. And he talked about this ancient Jewish parable. This ancient Jewish parable, it talks about, and I don't want you to be distracted by the terminology because it was a part of the caste system in ancient ancient Jewish culture. But it talks about a master who had three servants. This master had three servants, and I want you to think this master, all of the riches, the wealth, the land acquisition that you could possibly think of, this master had. He was extremely well off, and he had three servants, and he was preparing to go on a long, long journey. Well, to these three servants, he entrusted them with a certain amount of talents. Talents were a form of currency in ancient Jewish culture. To one of the servants, he gave 5 talents. To the other one, he gave 2 talents. And to the other one, he gave 1 talent. He went on his long journey and didn't tell them when he was returning. So to the one who gave 5 talents, immediately he went and put his talent to work, and he got 5 more, which means now he has 5 plus 5. He has, oh, we on our feet. I love that. The one who he gave 2 talents did the same thing. He went and put his talents to work, and then he got 2 more for the 2 he originally had, which means now he has 2 plus 2. He has, okay, y'all with me. Y'all with me. Well, with the one who he gave 1 talent, he didn't respond the same way. Instead of him going to put his talent to work, instead he went and buried it out of fear. So maybe some weeks, months, or years went by. This master eventually comes back looking for a report from what he gave to his 3 servants. He came to the one who he gave 5 talents. He came to him happy-go-lucky. He's like, master, you gave me 5 talents. I went and put it to work. Now I have 5 more. I have 10. He said, well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful over a few things. I'm going to make you rule over many. He went to the one who he gave 2 talents. And he said, master, look, you gave me 2 talents. I went and put it to work. And now I have 2 more. I have 4 now. He said, well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful over a few things. I'm going to make you rule over many. Well, he went to the one who he gave 1 talent. And instead of him giving a report like the other 2, he gave an excuse. And excuses are monuments of nothing that build bridges that lead to nowhere. Those who use these tools of incompetence are masters of nothing. He said, master, I knew you were a harsh man. So out of fear, I didn't go multiply it. I buried it. The master immediately got infuriated with this servant and said, "You wicked and slothful servant. I didn't give you what I gave you to bury it. I gave it to you to multiply it." If I can pause and parenthetically digress right there, I want to implore you and encourage you that it's not about what you got, it's what you do with what you have. Because here's what I found out in ancient Jewish culture, one talent was worth 10 to 15, 12 to 20 years worth of wages. One talent. But because we can be so distracted by what everybody else has, we don't understand the value of what's in our own hands. If I went out of here right now and went to Dollar General and got a basketball and put my signature on, it wouldn't be worth much, if anything. But if LeBron James got that same basketball and put his signature on it, it'd be worth millions. So sometimes it's not about the product as much as it is whose hands it's in. If I put a product in your hands, if I put a job title in your hands, if I put a responsibility in your hands, does it become that much better just because it's in Lauren's hands? That's not even my favorite part of this parable, y'all. What happened was he, the one who gave one talent to that went and buried it instead of multiplying it, he told him, "I want you to go back and get the talent from where you buried it and bring it back to me." He knew exactly where to go because we never forget where we buried the things that we should have used. He went and got it, brought it back to the master. And the master took it from him and gave it to the one who he gave 5 talents to, who reproduced and got 5 more. And now he has 1 more, which means he has how many? Y'all on your feet. That's like Pythagorean's theorem. I wouldn't have got there too fast. I'd be at some place, they'd be like 20. No. It's 11. It's 11. It's 11. I want to pause right there and let you know that you cannot allow your lack of stewardship to be the reason why what was really meant for you goes to somebody else. I don't want you to become so comfortable with what you have that you feel like you don't have to use it to the best of your ability anymore. Because the reality is, there are some people on the bench waiting on you to make a mistake. And they're just saying, "Coach, if you just give me what you gave him, if you just give me what you gave her, I will not bury, I will multiply." You've got to learn how to use what you have. Harriet Tubman, she's on record in an interview saying that every time I thought, this interviewer asked her, "Were you ever afraid to be caught?" She said, "All the time." She said, "There were plenty of times that I thought I was going to be caught. There were plenty of times that I thought I was going to be captured. There were plenty of times that I thought the road was coming to an end. But every single time," Harriet Tubman said this in an interview, she said, "I got on my knees and I prayed to my Lord, my God, and every time he made a way." He also says in this interview that he carried a rifle. And they said, "You were afraid. That's why you carried the rifle." She says, "Yes, I carried the rifle just in case we got caught. But on the contrary, I also carried the rifle for my own, for the people who I had grown up with, for the people who had done life with me. I carried it for that reason." And she said in an interview, she said, "I carried it because every single time that it looked like we were going to be caught, every single time where it seemed like that we were cornered, every single time where it looked like that our road had come to an end, one of the people I was trying to help tried to turn around and go back to the plantation, to which I would raise my rifle and force them to keep going to freedom." And ladies and gentlemen, I promise, I'm clear. I don't have a rifle. But what I do have is a voice to tell you that when you get tired, you've got to learn how to keep on going. When it seems like what you do isn't meaningful, you've got to learn how to keep on going. When the road gets tough, when it seems like you don't have a context for the next phase of life that you're about to go into, I need you to embrace the reality that though I may get tired, though I may get weary, though I may not want to take another step or be in this position any longer, I've got to learn how to keep on going. And Lauren just asked me before this, she said, "I bet you aren't nervous, are you? You do this all the time." I said, "No, I'm always nervous." She said, "Well, really? Well, what do you do about those nerves?" Nothing. I just learned how to do it nervous. And sometimes you got to learn how to do it scared. Do it uncomfortable. Do it fearful. Do it depressed. Do it tired. But however you do it anyway. Thank you.